Hello everyone, UgoDre here, and this is my MoneyBrief. I haven't done this in a while. Anyway, yeah, so today's MoneyBrief, I always said it was always going to be when there's something very important, and there is something very important now, and that is crude oil prices. And so crude oil prices has been falling over the last few weeks and closed April much lower than it did anytime this year. We're seeing crude oil prices at $65 per barrel. And we're in the first week of May, and already it's fallen below $60. At some point, it was like $57 or so. And I'm talking about Brent crude prices, not even like WTI, which is, the US-based crude oil price benchmark. But Nigeria uses Brent crude as is oil benchmark. And it's been falling. So why is it falling? Trump and China are still battling this tariff issue. I'm sure you all recall Donald Trump leveled the 140 or so percent tariff on China, and China also reciprocated. And so, the global belief out there is with this war ensuing, then global economic growth is likely going to slow, especially in China. And if it slows, then demand for crude oil is likely also to slow down. And they also say that, from the reports that I've read, shipping and air travel and a lot of these things that facilitate movement of goods across the world contributes about 10% to crude oil demand globally. So now that it's very likely that, shipping is likely going to slow down because of these tariffs, then demand for crude oil is likely going to be hit. And that has serious impact on us here in Nigeria. And that's one. And secondly, OPEC countries also got together. They call themselves OPEC Plus. Of course, Nigeria is not part of them, even though Nigeria is part of OPEC. But OPEC Plus countries also got together and also announced that they're going to ramp up crude oil production outputs. Now, that is not a good thing, because when there is too much crude oil out there as well, then prices tend to always also go lower. And when prices go lower, then countries that can't really meet their crude oil production outputs gets hit. And that's where Nigeria comes in. So Nigeria relies on crude oil prices for its budget. So per the 2025 budget, which the president signed a couple of months ago, the benchmark crude oil price was $75 per barrel. And we said we're going to do 2 million barrels per day for 2025. I think they probably even reduced that number to about 1.8 or 1.9 million barrels per day. But hey, we're actually nowhere close to that number. On the average, we're probably around 1.7 million barrels per day, and that includes condensates. And so we're already short of our crude oil output targets. And to make it worse, we're now seeing oil prices fall below the $75 per barrel benchmark that we've set for our budget. Now it's below $60 per barrel. So what does this all mean? Well, first of all, it means government is not going to be able to get all the revenue that they targeted for 2025, and that could impact capital projects across the country. It could definitely impact government expenditure, even government's ability to, send money to the poor, which is part of the plans for 2025. And so it's a big problem, because then Nigeria's budget deficit would also widen. Budget deficit is estimated about 13.3 trillion for the 2025 budget, and that is based on $75 per barrel. So budget deficit essentially is the government's budget expenditure being higher than the government's revenue expectations. And so that means you're running deficits. It's almost like you're spending more than what you earn, right? So if you're spending more than what you earn, it means you have a deficit, and that deficit has to be financed either from debt or maybe somebody that's just giving you or dashing you money. In Nigeria's case, it used to be both of it. So we do have debt, and we also have, foreign aid. But these days with Donald Trump, foreign aid is really not that reliable anymore. So it means that we'll have to rely on debt. So are we going to likely borrow more? That, I don't know. That's what it looks like. Well, I was at a session where this question was put to the Minister of Finance, and he did say that the government is looking at various other scenarios that they can use to address this issue, because they also know that it's a huge challenge, and they were asked, like, how are you going to solve this problem? That's the big problem, because already we are seeing a likely widening of our fiscal deficit. And then the bigger elephant in the room. FX. Yeah. So when crude oil prices fall, the exchange rate tends to be under pressure. This is backed by data. So this is not me just spewing out stuff. This is backed by data. Whenever crude oil prices fall, the exchange rate tends to weaken. So the exchange rate is correlated to crude oil prices. So when crude oil prices go up, the Nigerian economy tends to do very well as well. So now that we're seeing crude oil prices go down, we're worried that that's going to affect the Naira. And no surprises, we've seen the exchange rate go from about 1.5 to about 1.6. And the CBN is also trying to, defend it. According to the CBN, most of what they're doing now, that is the dollar that they're supplying in the market, was what they bought in January when things were good. But now that things are looking a little shaky, they are selling that back into the market to provide some kind of liquidity so that we can have a stable exchange rate. The question then is, how long are they going to keep doing this? Is it going to last? And that's why I'm really worried, because we do need these crude oil prices to go up. Can't afford it to be below $65, we can even manage. But $60, that means we're already $15 off the target for 2025. So that's why some of us are kind of worried. On the flip side, though, lower crude oil prices also means, lower fuel payments, because then fuel prices should also go down. Because, fuel prices is also tied to crude oil, price. And we all know that most of the fuel now are refined locally. So that exchange rate pressure that we tend to always have in the past really isn't there anymore. Even though, crude oil prices or dollars or exchange rate also affects local refiners as well, because some of the equipments they use are foreign and not locally made. And some of their overheads as well are foreign as well and not local expenses. But nevertheless, the impact can't be the same as it was a few years ago. And so on the flip side, to those of us in the streets, might just be a good thing that oil prices going down, because fuel prices will go down. And that could also perhaps maybe impact on inflation numbers. So the problem really is, it's the Naira still going to be correlated to crude oil prices as it's always been in the past. Past historically tells us yes, but maybe things might have changed now, because back then we always had a different kind of exchange rate regime. Now we seem to have a free and floating exchange rate. Well, not fully floated, but unified exchange rate that is semi-floating. So it's a market-driven exchange rate. And so for that reason, maybe things might just be different this time. But that's something that we all got to watch. Will the exchange rate stay on at least at that 1.6 level and not go below? Or will things get worse? All right, that is my money brief for today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that I've been able to break this down, the relationship between crude oil prices and the Naira. Until we do this again, do have a profitable day ahead. Bye.